Along the way, you meet some special people in life, and they carry maybe a kind of grace, a naturalness, an authenticity that's so refreshing. Let me take this time to welcome all of you. We're so glad that you're joining us today. I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Miranda Macpherson. And if you don't know who she is, let me give you a little insight. Miranda Macpherson is a contemporary spiritual teacher, counselor, and author of The Way of Grace, The Transforming Power of Ego Relaxation. She's known for her depth of presence, clarity, and refined capacity to guide people into direct experience of the sacred. Miranda, it's such a great pleasure to have you. I'm so glad we're reconnecting again after a while. I remember the first time we met in one of these summits and conversations. I was like, I like her. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Sister Jenna. The feeling of recognition and deep appreciation for you as well is very much present in my heart. And delighted to be here with everyone who's listening. And yeah, let's dive in.
So life continues to unfold, and one of the big topics of your life is grace. What is grace? Why is it the practical key for navigating these times that we're in?
Yeah. Well, I think we're so often used to thinking of grace as this sort of lofty thing that maybe comes upon us and fills our heart with gratitude, which of course it does. But when I say grace, I really mean direct experience of divine presence that is really our deepest nature, is, what's most important, all the essential qualities of our soul and of our humanity coming alive directly from within us. And what that does that's so important is it reconnects us with who we are, with what's important, with our deepest humanity, and with what's most real and meaningful in life. And so it gives us a ground inside of ourselves to really do the important work that we all must do, to be able to relax out of ego, fear, defensive habits of control, negative judgments and self-criticism, or, the kind of criticism that leads to polarization in our interpersonal relationships and in our world. And it gives us a way to really receive what we need to reconnect with divine love, with the love within ourselves, to learn to trust and cultivate those virtues of humility and patience and joy and compassion and forgiveness that make us the noble human beings that we need to be. It's also grace that helps us, dances with our rightful effort in our spiritual practice, to help us open to the shifts in our consciousness that help us to truly move on, to let our suffering and difficulty be transformed into wisdom, and to live it, to really embody that wisdom and love and spiritual maturity in response to daily life. And I think we're in a time where what's needed most is more of us who are more grounded, awake to our deepest nature, in touch with our humanity, and capable of responding gracefully and with wisdom rather than just reacting in these great challenging times that we're in together.
You're seeing a lot of grace in these times?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of both. I'm seeing a lot of devolution, even in people who are sort of spiritually oriented. And I think that's understandable, because with what we're dealing with the coronavirus and the challenges in our culture, it is a time of great catharsis and change. And for most of us, change can bring up all sorts of things. It can bring up fear. It can bring up, uncertainty, insecurity. And so we have a choice in great uncertainty to devolve or to rise up. And of course, if we don't have tools, it's hard for us to do anything but devolve under stress. And so I think this is where spiritual practices And really applying them practically to our situation is so important right now. Because if we can, then we can harness whatever's going on, whether that looks like, increased feelings of anxiety or worry about our loved ones, our health, our financial situation, that of our family, or the state of the world, or whatever that's provoking in us, into the path, which really means really seeing what's coming up for us and working with that with compassion and honesty and courage. And if we do, then it actually can propel us a lot faster into new possibilities, not just personally, but collectively. And that's what I'm excited about, the potential for us to harness these times as a gateway to whole other possibilities.
For some reason, I just can't get old thinking that when we talk about these things, compassion, trust, grace, honesty, dignity, it just seems like that's what should be the norm, like this is how we are supposed to be with each other and with ourselves. And then we bump into another energy that perhaps forces us to remember how important that is. How can we remain peaceful and trusting when it seems like so much around us is so uncertain?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what's really helpful to see is that as human beings, the first thing that happens to us, we land in a body, we come out of other human beings, and we grow and learn, and our individual consciousness, our soul, is shaped by the way that we're treated, what we experience in our early environment. And so at first, given that we need, everything to come from our parents and our carers, inevitably we learn that, trust is always on the interpersonal level. And of course, until we get older, we don't realize that there's a big difference between, human beings at different stages of their evolutionary capacity. And so, very rarely do our parents or carers intend to cause us to mistrust. But inevitably they're human and they're doing their best, and sometimes under very difficult conditions. But we're on the receiving end of that, and so we all develop mistrust. But I happen to believe that mistrust is learned, that what is natural, as you were saying, is to trust, and to be good to each other and to be kind and compassionate. So we all contract when we encounter lack of kindness, lack of holding or support or consistency or goodness. And we develop deep beliefs that become powerful foundations in our unconscious mind, that we're not safe, that we have to push, that we can't relax, and that it won't be okay. And these are all thoughts that become primary train trucks of our familiar default navigation system of ego. And so for that to evolve out of that, firstly we have to see it and understand it. And to see it and understand what has caused us or been part of our development of mistrust, because it's not natural. Happens to us all, but it is a development. And it can relax, but we have to see it first, and we have to see it without judgment. We have to see it all with love and forgiveness, including the love and the forgiveness for whoever might have been part of the development of our mistrust. And that helps us to clarify and to be able to come into the present and to really meditate deeply on what's actually holding us in this present moment. And if we relax the thought that what's holding us has to be interpersonal only, then we might see that existence has a holding quality that comes, for example, in the fact that the whole plant kingdom is compassionately absorbing your and my carbon dioxide and transmuting that into life-giving oxygen. And a press release from us isn't needed for that to happen every day. It's just the natural grace of nature, of life. And we might notice that the earth is holding us. We might notice that a quality we can't necessarily know or name is somehow transmitted through your presence or mine or someone else. And we notice that we feel something that is profoundly loving and peaceful and nourishing. And somehow it's here. And it's caring. And so what I'm really saying is that when we meditate deeply, when we clear up the mistrust that's always past being projected onto future, and we come deeply into the now and meditate on what's holding us right now, we start to encounter a love that always is, that permeates and pervades and nourishes and welcomes and includes us and everyone all the time. And that is...
Perfect world, you know.
Well, yeah, well,
It
but
really
it's
sounds like
part
the
of reality. And we can experience that when we train ourselves to turn our attention there. And it's so powerful for our soul because it helps the frightened parts settle down. It helps us to be peaceful, to just be here, you know, to find courage that it's okay, we can be here and show up with more openness in this moment, with the attitude of a happy learner.
Miranda, is there a difference? Thank you for that. It is very helpful. Would you say that there's a difference between blind trust and trusting the loving intelligence underlying all of life? I mean, what's the tool to distinguish the difference? Because sometimes we trust and end up down a rabbit hole.
That's right. Well, the trust we need isn't blind trust. So we need trust that has discriminating wisdom within it. And so, for example, it's obvious when you really just consider the facts. Not everyone is trustworthy. You know, the degree of someone's realization and integration as a spiritual being, as a human being, is usually the degree to which they're capable of being trustworthy, of having their actions be completely congruent with their words. And if I'm honest, if any of us are honest, there are short gaps here and there. And so what makes a person trustworthy has a lot to do with, you know, their own spiritual development and their own honesty and transparency. But really what I'm pointing to is, even though there are varying degrees of human beings' trustworthiness, the loving goodness underlying all of existence is not dependent on anyone's personality, because it's not arising from personality. It's like when you just hang out in nature, and I think it's very good for everyone's soul to spend time in nature, because it teaches us to observe the way things are when we don't mess with them with our mind. We usually experience being in nature as healing and balancing and soothing, which it is, but it's also a teacher of the goodness. When you really observe nature, you see how profoundly good it is, you know, and that goodness is basic. I love how some of the revered philosophers through the ages have pointed to this. So the term that I'm using about the goodness comes from Plato, who talked about that underlying ground of reality. He called it the good. And Dante went further and called it the loving goodness. And Dante actually said, the loving goodness has such wide arms, it welcomes whatever turns to it. And so we're all individual in the way we relate to this loving goodness. For some of us, it feels meaningful to call that God, or to call that, you know, Divine Mother, or to call that Great Spirit. But it doesn't really much matter what name we use. It does matter, however, that we turn our attention to recognize that this mystery of existence is loving in its nature, and that we are part of that inherently, and that at any moment when we are contracted, caught, scared, lost, if we bring our attention back to that, we can find peace, and we can also find the discrimination to know what's wise and what's not, what makes good sense. And it's our heart, really, that perceives what's true and what's not true. So a lot of the journey has, I believe, to be about listening in it, really listening to our heart and getting to know our heart that is love and also has an I in it. All the great mystics of the different traditions have spoken about the I of God as being an I that is centered in the heart, which means it's a point of perception that is inherent to not just our emotional heart, but the very heart of our being. There's a lot more I could say on that. It's quite esoteric, but I think we can feel it. It's our heart that can feel when something's true from when it's not, if we listen.
You wonder, the feeling of compassion and love is so breathtaking, and it's so soul enlightening. And I think when we do programs like this, somebody, somewhere, awakens to it. How can we actually compassionately address some of our own reactive tendencies, but rather regard them as invitations to evolve spiritually in the face of increasing polarization in our culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that the most important thing I would say is, number one, refuse to judge yourself for the fact of your reactivity. Start there. So many people on the path, beat themselves up when they catch themselves in the act of judging, getting scared, feeling lost, insecure, not knowing what to do. But if we judge ourselves for the fact of a reaction, what it will mean is that we'll feel so bad and we'll create more layers of tension that we can't actually open up and take a look and see what's really going on here. And that's what we need to do. So the first thing, we have to just refuse to judge ourselves for the fact of the reactivity. Find a simple practice that helps you just to ground yourself, whether that's saying a mantra, going for a walk in nature, listening to a downloadable meditation that you can find on various apps, including my website, whatever helps you to come back into your heart, ground yourself in the present moment so you can bring on curiosity. What am I really reacting to? What's really going on here? And we need that attitude of curiosity and compassion in order to really get to the bottom of the matter. And sometimes the answer isn't immediate. Sometimes all we know when we're in a reaction is we're inflamed and we're upset and we don't like this, we don't like that, it's wrong and it's bad. So we breathe and feel that, but just don't act on it yet. Stay with the inquiry. What is it? What am I reacting to? And the next question is, who's reacting? How old do I feel here? Is this only about this situation, or has it got memories of similar related incidences from my past? That's an important question, because often what's happening is we're being triggered from, what psychologically would be called an object relation, a layer of our mind that has the introjection of a tussle with our parent figures that we couldn't quite deal with. And so it's really an invitation to open our heart to the suffering and the stress and the hurt and the upset of that part of our soul. And if we open our heart to it and see it fully and refuse to judge ourselves for it, that is compassion. And that is the environment in which the grace does the integration. That's our participatory role, is doing the investigation and refusing to judge ourselves and being interested to really see what's at the core. But it's grace that heals us ultimately and brings us into further clarification or healing, or moves us in a better direction, or helps us to see what's wise and true, what to say, what not to say, when to remain quiet, what to let go of, That's my experience.
Grace breathes inner wisdom.
That's sure,
It
absolutely.
really it awakens that up, and you feel like that's what we all need in the world, is a grace device that can wake up people or tap them on the shoulder and go, there's another way. There's another way of doing this.
Absolutely.
Miranda,
I would say
whenever
that term you used, I say that the more we practice all that I'm speaking of, what eventually happens is that our vessel, body, heart, mind, our human vessel becomes a grace delivery device, an embodiment of wisdom and love and compassion and humanity and skillful means that can walk in this ordinary world with all of its muck and grit and messiness and confusion, but from a place of depth and beauty and truth. And I really feel that's what's needed now, more of us who are capable of doing that.
with you fully. I mean, with all the online programs that are going on, do you have anything that's coming up, a workshop or an event, a new book, a new program that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I have lots of things actually, but one thing I would like to point attention to is I've been focusing a lot of my attention in this time of COVID to creating downloadable things. People can just hit play and get the help that they need in a stressful moment. And I have also been really enjoying creative collaboration. So there's a new meditation that's not just a grab and go meditation, it's a 45-minute journey called Cultivating Compassion, for yourself, for your loved ones, for all beings. And that's available on my website. And I recommend people also work with my book, The Way of Grace. There's a beautiful audio book version of it where I'm reading the entire book, taking the readers through every practice, every inquiry, including the work on trust that we were referencing here in this interview. A lot of practical stuff, as well as what people will find on my website. So
Beautiful, Miranda. We have a few minutes left. Could you take us into a meditation?
I'd love to, yeah. So just take a couple of deep breaths. And just feel the support of the way that the chair cradles your body. And just sense as you let your breath become a little longer, slower, the fact that your inhale naturally carries with it life-giving oxygen that nourishes and sustains you and all of us. And that what you're really taking in is love and nourishing goodness itself. Receive that, not just oxygen, but nourishing, loving goodness. And on the exhale, feel yourself just melting and letting go in that. Recognizing that you are held and sustained and loved. By a presence that is always here, will always be here, that knows you, that accompanies you, and will be loving you and nourishing and accompanying you all the days of your life. And because of this, all is and will be well. So, thank you, Sister Jenna. God bless
Thank you.
you for the beautiful presence you carry and all that you share in service of human souls and the evolution of our world. I bow to you, and I'm grateful for your being.
So much, Miranda. The feelings are very mutual, very mutual. You shared and left us with much to contemplate on, but more so, much to experience, much to feel through. One of the things that I'm taking away is becoming the embodiment, no? To become the embodiment of grace, where you really walk the talk, you really are what shows up in front of people, inside out. And perhaps that's the ultimate goal of enlightenment and the ultimate goal of spiritual awakening. Any final comments and words you'd like to leave with us today before I say Om Shanti?
Well, just for everyone to know that they're very precious, that we are known and loved by something that's so much deeper than our mind and our fear, and that we can always rest in that at any moment and receive the restoration we need to show up as the embodiment of grace in that very moment and bring more grace into the world in the process. And that we're needed now, those of us who are on a spiritual path. It's really time for us to live it as best we can, as imperfectly though that may be, and help our loved ones in our community to be more peaceful.
Thank you, Miranda Macpherson, for your time and for your love and your wisdom. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bless everybody.
Everyone, I'm sure you've taken a lot of insights, and hopefully they will become embodiments for you to really bring truth to power. Truth to power. But one of the qualities that we need now more than ever is grace. So let's bring a whole lot more grace in our lives and begin to trust with intelligence that it will move us towards an atmosphere and an environment and a culture of an awakening. Thank you so much for joining us.